We come to this now. Stace SA has conducted a survey to evaluate how South Africans have been impacted by the lockdown. From those who took part, well, the numbers indicate that under 10% of participants lost their jobs or had to close their businesses. According to the report, almost 90% of respondents have remained employed. Let's find out what else the survey discovered. We're now joined by a Statistician General, that's Mr. Risenga Maluleka. So thank you so much for your time and welcome to ENCA. I understand that this particular survey was conducted between the 29th of April and the 6th of May. Just please take me through the geographical representation here, just in terms of, the respondents who've participated, but also the criteria used. I mean, did they have to have access to the internet? Did they have to perhaps email you? What was the criteria as well?
The first thing is that we should understand, Tumelo, that during this time, it's not easy for States SA employees and field workers to go out to field, not because of conditions only of the lockdown. It's that the public is wary of any movement. So what we have done is that we have used the contact numbers of people that we have collected during our field work, and those contact numbers were used to reach out to members of the public. And we're now, in terms of geographic representation, let us appreciate that when you do a telephone sample, it is not easy to link to a geographic representation, because someone may say, I'm answering from Gauteng now, but I'm usually based in Limpopo. But at that point in time, unless, and in our regular surveys, our field workers, when they go with the computers, we capture the GPS coordinates, so the geographic representation is captured by us. We didn't use it in this regard. There were 2,688 people who responded, the majority of them women, about 53% women and 47 men, and we couldn't delineate it according to geographic representation. Certainly 90% of the people said during that period, the reference period, they said they are employed. About 8.1% said they are not employed. And if you look at that, there are reasons that have come across. One of the reasons that came is that during the lockdown, about 38% of the businesses indicated that they had closed in response to the lockdown, while about 30% indicated that, closer to 31%, indicated that they had a problem of lack of customers. And because there were no customers, there is no way they would be able to remain operational.
Right. Let's talk about the respondents then. Just bearing in mind, of course, the 2,688, respondents that you were able to communicate with, or at least derive these stats from. So I would like to know about the respondents, or perhaps even the difference in percentages, please, Mr. Maluleka, of respondents who usually derive their income from salaries and wages, respondents who derive their incomes from savings and investments, but those who had no income at all. How are the numbers looking there?
Firstly, let us appreciate that we looked at about, there were 77.6% who indicated that before the lockdown, they were able to derive their income from salaries. And during the lockdown, that number had declined to about 66.9%. So you can see it's in the excess of about 9 percentage points, closer to 10 percentage points of a decline. But one of the things that we have seen is the jump in the number of people, the percentage of people that are getting their income from UIF. Before the lockdown, the people who were getting their income from the UIF was less than 1%. I think it was at 0.5%. Now it jumped all the way to 2.5%. So you can see that while people could not draw their income from salaries, they resorted to benefiting, and we are talking salaries and wages.
Right.
They resorted to going to benefit from the UIF.
So while this is the reality of South Africans who perhaps had to depend on UIF, some even having to go to the extent of going to their savings or relying on their relatives and extended family members to assist them financially, did you also encounter respondents who said the national lockdown nor COVID-19 had any impact whatsoever on their financial obligations?
Certainly, we looked at income. 25.6% of the respondents indicated that their income had been reduced, whereas only 56% said it remained the same, and 11% indicated that it's too early to tell. Now, when you have 25.6% of the population whose income has reduced, certainly there is an effect on their commitments. There is an effect, no doubt. But one of the things that we have also seen is that even from the side of industry, in another survey that we conducted, from the side of industry, companies indicated, 90% of the companies indicated that they can't reach their regular threshold of turnover. Whereas about 30% indicated that in about 1 to 3 months, if the situation sustains, the lockdown continues, and they are not able to get customers, they will be forced to have to close down. So there are a bit of challenges out there, and we still are continuing to measure. Two things how we measure. These are called convenience surveys, where we use them, we go rapidly to go out and measure. There are still other measures that we will have to take, which we still have to come back at the end of this quarter and say, how is the economy looking? That is by after the end of June. We usually report on the GDP every quarter.
Yeah.
We also report on employment during the quarterly labor force survey. So those will still come back on.
All right. I want to then touch on the concerns that South Africans have, or at least the respondents that you communicated with, just in terms of their long-term and short-term impact of COVID-19. How are those numbers then looking, according to your survey?
Firstly, I want to take this discussion starting from our one wave, where we looked at the health and behavioral side of these issues, where about 7.8% of the members of the public indicated that, and I'm talking people with pre-existing conditions, indicated that they are not able to access their chronic medication for reasons of fear of being infected with the virus. 45% of those within that 7.8 cohort indicated that they fear being infected. Some said they fear being arrested. About 17% indicated that they don't have money. So already you can see that there are effects to some sections of the society, while certainly about a third of those who responded in this regard did indicate that they are worried about the long-term effects of the coronavirus. And when you look at that, then you look at that with the poverty numbers in terms of hunger. People who had experienced the hunger before the lockdown were sitting at about 4%. And now when we looked at during the lockdown, that number jumped to 7%. So there are starting to be effects that are coming from the coronavirus. One thing we should appreciate is that the life will never be the same, even when we go back to normal. That normal will not be the status quo that we used to have. It will be a different setup altogether.
And equally concerning, Mr. Maluleka, is that even with these numbers, I mean, you're talking here highlighting how the hunger stats had increased from 4% to 7%. We've also seen, that just in reality on various media platforms where food parcels had to constantly be donated to various communities. But equally concerning with that in mind is that there's a portion, I understand, from your respondents who say they're actually not even sure if they will still have a job post-COVID-19 and the lockdown?
Certainly, with firms not making money and some firms thinking they will have to close down, the effects will be there. But we will still measure. While at the stage we are looking at those who say that, when we measure and come back, we will say how many people are affected.
All right, then. Well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Mr. Risenga Maluleka, taking us through a survey that they have conducted just to see how, some of the respondents who participated, 2,688 in total, deriving off 53% rather of women and 47% of men, who are just giving out various challenges faced there, from being employed pre-COVID-19 to being unemployed, not being sure if they'll be able to return to work, some having to close businesses and showing their long-term and short-term concerns, of course, post-COVID-19.